for express approach and quick learning for repertoire for black. Now, it's a lot more difficult when you try to pick up and learn one given system for black than for white, because you don't have as much flexibility. So with a white, if you don't make really the best moves, you may not get advantage, you may get an equal position, but you're comfortable with your play and you are okay. With a black, you have a lot more responsibility because you cannot be passive. If you are overly passive, you may get really bad position, or if you are inaccurate in complications, you may just get lost position. So you have a lot more responsibility, you have to be a lot more precise. So, well, you don't know. With the white, you choose the first move. With the black, you don't know. You have to be prepared for E4, D4, C4 continuations, and you have to be comfortable every time once you pass the opening stage. So, well, let's start with E4. What can we do on E4 to learn one safe system that will get us through the opening? Well, we know the Sicilian is one of the sharpest openings in opening theory, on E4 or D4 together, on whole opening theory. So if this is the sharpest opening, then you have to learn the most, because you cannot play sharp openings without knowing all theory around it. So we must exclude for this preparation Sicilian. So not too many other openings left. I'm excluding French defense since I don't believe it, and if someone recommends you French to play French with black, it's not going to be me. And Caro Kann is a little too passive too, so as one of the openings that I can recommend to play, and it's easy to learn and it's relatively safe, is D6, D4, Knight F6, Knight C3. Well, now if we play G6 move, then it's regular Pirc defense. But E5 move is something I want to talk about and something I want to discuss. Now, E5 move, as you can tell immediately, white has a chance to go to endgame right from the opening. Well, it's going to be queens of the board, but it's not going to be exactly an endgame. It's going to be kind of a middle game without queens, because every other piece except for the queen will be on the board. So the most expected continuation for white is D takes E, D takes E, and queen takes D8, which we're going to analyze first. Also, other possible move is Knight F3. It's for a longer game and more of a middle game and possibly more complicated. Well, actually, it's not possibly, it is more complicated. So let's start with D takes E, and D takes E, queen takes D8, king takes D8. And let's talk this position first before we make any moves. We have equal development. We have symmetrical pawn structure. The problem, if there is a problem, any problem for black, is that their king moved and white has a chance to castle long side, castle queen side with a check, which gives them enough tempo. But is this enough to get any kind of an advantage? Well, let's look. The most precise move and probably the best move is bishop c4, attacking black pawn on f7. And best move for black is bishop e6. Bishop takes e6 and f takes e6. Now let's talk about this pawn structure. There are two ways to assess this position. First, black has double pawns, weak pawns, and white has a big advantage. That's a wrong assessment. The correct assessment, black does have possibly some weakness on in a form of a double pawn, but on the other hand, black controls almost every major square in the center. After bishop takes e6, fe, bishop e3 is the normal move to be expected. We go bishop d6, then maybe f3 with the white. Black has to develop knight to d7. Suppose white castles long. We go king to e7 and knight e2. Now, how should black play this position? Black has dark square bishop. White has dark square bishop. Black has to put their pawns on the light squares. a6, black wants to go b5 next. Next move is b5. There is nothing can white do to stop it. And now for instance, if white goes a4, we can easily go rook h to b8 or a to b8, still preparing b5. And move like a5 will be very dangerous for white, since bishop b4 may simply cost white a pawn. So after a6, no matter what white does next, black will go b5, and amazingly, black has control of more squares than white does. White cannot really take advantage of d-file, and they don't really own d-file. For example, if they go rook d2, and we go b5, now they go rook d1, we go rook h to d8. Black is ready for confrontation on d-file. What can white have? Does white have any constructive plan? I don't think so. I don't think white does. I have played this position for white a few times. I've never played it for black, and I never, against a good player, I never got any kind of an advantage. So I don't remember what results were, but results might have been not necessarily indicate the assessment of this position. So this position I consider absolutely equal. Black can go bishop b4, or I don't know, maybe even rook b8 and b4, or a5 and a4 and b4. There is no active plan that white can use in this position. So now let's go back and look at the continuation a little sharper, or, well, I wouldn't say sharper, I would say maybe a little more complicated and with a lot more life and with queens on the board. So this continuation is not to take pawn on e5, keep the queens on the board and go knight f3. Now what I want to do is take on d4, knight takes d4, bishop e7. Bishop e7, now white has three different ways to play. White has bishop c4 move, which is not the best move, bishop e2 move, and also bishop f4 move. Let's look at them. Why is this so good for black? Well, black wants to castle quick and then play in the center. Black right now has some space disadvantage. So they are looking forward to going d5 at some point. Bishop c4 is not the best continuation because it helps black with a counterplay in the center. Castling, and now white has two moves. White can castle or play bishop b3. Now if white goes bishop b3 in this position, what you should do, you just simply go knight a6, and remember, most of the time you do develop knight on a6 here because you want to put knight on c5. You put knight on c5, you attack the pawn, possibly get rid of a strong bishop. Well, let's see what can happen after knight a6, castle, knight c5, and suppose white goes rook e1. What can we play in this position? I think there are several ways to play. The plan I like and the move I like is a5. Now threatening a4. If white goes a3, we always take the bishop on b3. Well, I would rather take white's bishop on b3 when white cannot recapture with an a pawn. So I would go a5. Then possibly I go bishop or c6, maybe rook e8. It's very, very active position for black. After knight c5, white does not have really constructive plan. Well, on something like bishop g5, white has to pay attention that after rook e8, there may be a tactical shot, knight takes e4. It may or may not work, depends on concrete situation. That's what you should calculate. So you go rook e8, and you see possibly you go h6, and maybe then knight takes e4. Or even after h6, bishop h4, you may go knight h7. Exchange dark square bishop. Since you have some space disadvantage, you may want to exchange some pieces. But before you do that, it helps to put pawn on c6 to cover entirely d5 square. I think black here has sufficient counterplay to make this opening very playable. I would play it any time, and I do recommend it. This position I think is very playable. Now let's look at what we discussed. The move we discussed now was bishop b3. But why should white go bishop b3 rather than castle? Because after castling, knight takes e4. This is an equal position. White has no advantage. Knight takes e4, and there is d5. Fork. The best move is bishop d3, pawn takes e4, bishop takes e4, and knight d7 with black. Now knight goes to f6. And after knight d7, white can play bishop f4. Then we have knight c5. And if white plays knight f5, we have bishop f6 with a very reliable position. On queen g4, we may go knight e5. And on queen g3, maybe instead of knight e5, we can even go rook e8. And after bishop e3, knight e5, attacking queen, and then bishop takes f5. It's very, very safe position for black, and queen d5. White has absolutely no advantage. White has two bishops. Black has centralized knight. It's very difficult to remove, and every one of the pieces black is very, very active. It's totally equal position for black at least. Now, there are a couple of other continuations. The advantage of this opening has one advantage. It's not explored in theory. It's not explained in theory widely. It's not used very frequently, and it's not expected by your opponent. If you really study it well and you know it upside down, chances are you will get very playable and very satisfactory position. Again, we go e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5. Let's go knight f3, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop e7, and we just covered bishop c4 move. Let's look at bishop e2. Now, bishop e2, the advantage of bishop e2 move that it completely stops knight takes e4 idea, and so white does not have to move that bishop twice to prevent knight takes e4. Black castles. Now on bishop e2, black castles, white castles, and rook e8, f4. So white's getting some space advantage. Bishop f8. Now bishop f3. And the best move, I think, in this position, knight a6. Again, this knight, see, the knight c6 is a mistake because white plays knight takes c6, b takes c followed by e5, attacking knight and threatening bishop takes c6 with a fork. So the knight a6, knight heading towards c5 to put some pressure on white's central pawns. Knight a6, rook e1, knight c5, and after knight c5, white has to make decision how they continue development and what do they do with their c1 bishop, with the dark square bishop. Now let's look at something like bishop e3 is not possible because e4 pawn drops. So if they go bishop d2, it's really a passive square. What black wants to do here, they want to get rest of their pieces activated. So what you want to do, c6 is an all-purpose move, controls d5, b5 square, prepares queen for developing to b6, and possibly, in some cases, if white moves this knight back, maybe going b5 and b4, c6 is a good move. So we go c6. Now white really has problem to finish development. If they go queen e2, maybe they can go queen e2 and queen f2. Again, now we have to do little calculation. Knight takes e4 possibly doesn't work. I think it doesn't, because knight takes e4, and if we go d5, there may be knight f6 check. And white is going to be up a material. Queen takes f6, queen takes e8, queen takes d4, and bishop e3. So, but that's not the tactic that we need. We don't need any tactics. Tactics we play when we know it's definitely working. On queen e2, what we can do is simply go queen b6. You know, it's very possible that white is already in trouble. b2 pawn, d4 knight, possibly hanging. So bishop on d2 is kind of on the way to development. So the best move in this position is b3, to put the bishop on b2 where it's not going to be blocking their own pawns, their own pieces, and also will be developed on the active diagonal. On b3, black goes g6, bishop b2, bishop g7, and black has sufficient counterplay. That's a typical Indian type of position where one side has a center and the other side has some pressure against that center. And this is exactly the position we have in front of us now. Well, if white goes queen d2, I would go c6 here, possibly next queen b6, bishop d7, and maybe doubling rooks on e file. you see that every one of black's pieces is working. Also, keep in mind that this queen stands on the diagonal. In some, it may be ringing some bells for some small tactics or something. Well, that's something you have to check and to apply to the concrete position. So, well, the other move that white has in the original position, which is the original position I'm talking about, is e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5, knight f3, e takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop e7. The other move, I would say, is bishop f4. Now, bishop f4 move, we just castle, and the idea is white wants to castle long and have kind of sharp, it's kind of sharp way of playing this opening. Queen d2, but we can go now knight c6, castled long, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and bishop e6. Now what you want to play, you want to go a6, b5, and c5. And it's not easy. Actually, I have played this for white, and I really hated it. I was getting bad position against much weaker players. It wasn't a blitz and a semi-blitz, and I was getting bad position against a lot weaker players. But a lot weaker, they knew what to do, and kind of next 6-7 moves, they were playing almost automatically, and I found myself in a very uncomfortable position. What's going to happen here, that after a6, you want to go b5, c5, and b4. And it's kind of very standard. They don't have to be really geniuses to go c5 and b5, and then jump with the queen on a5, and try to mate you here. And I found myself very uncomfortable in a lot of times in a very bad position. And I can proudly announce that I lost a lot of them. So proudly, because that's what I recommend you to play. So this is actually a good position for black to play. Now, the black has little space disadvantage, but they have a lot better prospects on the queen side than white can do on the king side. So that pretty much wraps it. Now what, we spent maybe like 20-25 minutes, and we learned completely how to play against e4. Wait a minute, is it that easy? Well, what suffers? If we can learn one opening against e4 in 20 moves, on 20 minutes, well, it's not in 20 minutes, it's 20 minutes it took me to explain it to you. It's gonna take you a lot longer to understand. You have to play it out, you have to explore it, because there are various continuations white may play, because human mind has a lot of fantasy. So and you can see moves that I never covered here. And if you see something that was never covered here, it's not going to be nearly as good as once I did cover. So that's what you have to assess it yourself, and you have to see why it's not as good and find the antidote. So this, it takes me 20 minutes for me to explain. It may take you a month or 2 months to play it out. 20 minutes it takes only to go over the concrete variations that you have easy time understanding the basics of this opening. So now you have a tournament coming up, and against e4 you are all set. Now you know how to win against e4. Now you will learn how to win against d4, and you are all set. It's not like that. You're going to have playable position. Nobody guarantees you're going to get very active position and good chances to win. Even though this may happen, because you are well prepared with this opening. So And against e4, again, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5.
This is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for onlinechesslessons.net. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.